The quiet, almost silent night of November 4th, 1954, had descended upon Pontal, a village lost in the Brazilian hinterlands. The air was warm and humid, and a light easterly breeze, carrying scents from the distant Atlantic expanses, only occasionally rustled the dense foliage of the riverside trees, breaking the almost palpable silence of these deserted places. Jose Alves, a local resident, a simple and hardworking man whose life was inextricably linked to the land and the river, was at this late hour alone, engaged in his usual business, fishing in the mighty Pardo River, which flowed near his modest settlement. The moon, hidden behind a thick veil of clouds, barely illuminated the dark waters, and Jose relied more on experience and intuition than on sight. He sat in his usual spot, on a low clay bank, patiently waiting for a bite, immersed in his simple thoughts about tomorrow, about his family, about the upcoming harvest. Suddenly, an inexplicable anxiety made Jose Alves tear his gaze away from his fishing float and look up at the inky dark sky. What he saw made his heart stop, then pound furiously in his chest. Directly above him, slowly and completely silently, a strange, luminous object was approaching, unlike any celestial body or aircraft he knew. It didn't resemble an airplane or a helicopter, which Jose, in fact, had seen very rarely in his life. This object moved smoothly, confidently, as if surveying the area, and its light was soft, unearthly, pulsating. Gripped by a sudden, chilling stupor, the fisherman could neither move nor utter a sound. He only watched as the mysterious UFO, after describing a smooth arc, began to slowly descend and landed on the opposite, gentler bank of the river, just a few tens of meters away from him. The landed flying saucer, as Jose would later describe it, was so close that it seemed he could, by swimming across the river or wading through the shallows, reach out and touch its smooth, metallic surface. The object had a peculiar shape, which Jose, trying to find a comparison among familiar objects, described as two large bathtubs or basins joined by their wide rims. Its diameter, according to the fisherman's estimate, was approximately 10 to 15 feet, 3 to 4.5 meters, and its height was about 1.5 meters. The surface of the craft was smooth, with no visible seams or rivets, and it had a dull metallic sheen in the faint light emanating from the object itself. Jose noticed no wings, propellers, or nozzles that could explain its ability to fly. The man was so paralyzed by fear that even the thought of escape did not enter his head. He sat pressed against the ground, afraid even to breathe, his eyes riveted on the incredible craft. At that moment, when the tension reached its peak, a hatch, resembling a large rectangular window or door, smoothly and silently opened on the side of the craft facing the river. From the dark opening, one after another, 3 beings stepped onto the ground. They were short, no taller than a meter, perhaps even shorter, and their movements were quick and somewhat mechanical, lacking human fluidity. They wore smooth, close-fitting helmets on their heads, completely concealing their facial features, except, perhaps, for dark slits for their eyes. Their bodies were clad in one-piece, tight-fitting dark-colored suits, which seemed to be made of some elastic material. The skin on the few exposed areas that Jose could discern, perhaps on their hands or necks, was very dark, almost black, which contrasted sharply with the luminous object. Jose Alves, overcoming the waves of terror that washed over him, watched with bated breath the actions of these strange creatures. They paid no attention to him, as if he didn't exist, or as if he were no more than part of the surrounding landscape. The aliens moved purposefully along the bank, collecting samples of local flora. They bent down, plucked blades of grass, leaves from bushes and low trees, carefully examined them, and placed them in some small containers or bags attached to their belts. Their movements were precise and coordinated. They acted like a well-oiled team. One of the aliens, separating from the group, approached the very edge of the water. He took out something resembling a transparent flask or test tube from his equipment and, bending down, carefully filled it with river water. Then he carefully examined the flask in the light emanating from the ship and, satisfied, put it away. All this lasted, according to Jose's perception, no more than a few minutes, although time seemed to have stopped for him. Having collected the necessary samples, the aliens, just as quickly and completely silently, like shadows, jumped back into their craft through the same open hatch. The hatch closed smoothly, merging with the ship's hull so that not even a trace remained. A moment later, the object, without the slightest sound or visible effort, lifted off the ground, rose smoothly into the air, gained altitude, and with incredible speed rushed into the night sky, soon turning into a small, rapidly fading luminous, and then disappearing from view altogether. When Jose Alves finally recovered from the shock he had experienced, he was trembling violently. He sat on the bank for a long time, unable to believe what he had just seen. Returning to his village of Pontal towards morning, he, after much hesitation, told his wife what had happened, and then a few of his closest neighbors. His story quickly spread throughout the area. The residents of Pontal, who had known Jose Alves well for many years, later unanimously told representatives of the press and the few researchers interested in the case that Alves was a very quiet, calm, level-headed, and hardworking man. His life was simple and uncomplicated. Family, work on a small plot of land, and fishing, which was both a recreation and a means of subsistence for him. He was known for his honesty and directness, and no one had ever noticed in him a tendency to make things up or exaggerate. Moreover, as it turned out, Jose Alves was a man of little education and had practically no access to information from the outside world. He had never before heard of flying saucers, or aliens from outer space, or any similar stories that were already beginning to appear in the newspapers of large cities at that time. For him, a deeply religious man who believed in the existence of supernatural forces, the little dark figures and helmets he had seen on the riverbank could be nothing other than diabolical offspring, demons or devils emerging from hell. It was in these terms, within the categories of his traditional worldview, that he tried to explain to himself this incredible and frightening event, which forever changed his calm and measured life. The terror he experienced haunted him for a long time, and he tried never again to be alone on the riverbank after dark. His story, despite all its fantasticalness, was received with trust by many of his fellow villagers, precisely because of his impeccable reputation and the sincerity with which he shared his incredible experience.